I'm Ann Simmons in the newsroom of the Los Angeles Times. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge has finally welcomed a baby boy. The infant weighed in at a whopping 8 pounds 6 ounces and is doing well. The excitement over his arrival has been palpable. You can tell I'm excited. Our bureau chief in London, Henry Chu, has had a front seat and joins us today from London. Hello, Henry.
Hi, Anne.
So you can feel how excited I am. Tell us what it's been like there. The baby's finally arrived.
Well, yes, it's been pretty electric here as well. People have been waiting for this baby for months, and there's been a heat wave on an unusual heat wave over the last 2 weeks, which has just seemed to increase the feverish feeling that's been in the air. And then yesterday it broke with huge thunderstorms when the baby was finally born. But the excitement has been pretty high, and you saw that with the number of people who were crowding around the gates of Buckingham Palace last night just to catch a glimpse, not of the baby, not of the royals themselves, but just of the easel on which they mounted a piece of paper that said that the baby had been born and what sex the baby was and how much he weighed.
And are we talking about just Britons being excited, or have there been visitors, tourists, foreigners also enjoying the excitement?
It's both, and sometimes I almost think it's more foreigners than it is Brits, who are classically reserved, although that's not always the case. I was out of the palace last night, and it seemed to me that probably the majority of the people who were there were indeed visitors from foreign lands, and a lot of them were Americans. It strikes me sometimes as rather funny that so many Americans follow this royal family so closely when you think that it was their forebears who actually threw off this monarchy over 200 years ago to declare independence, and yet there it is. And you saw that also with the amount of media interest from American news organizations who were camped out in front of the hospital, in front of the palace, and trying to get every shot they could of this event.
And how is the Duchess doing? I understand that she has left the hospital. How's she doing?
She just left not long ago, and she looked fine, and so did her husband, although he perhaps looked a little weary having been up with her. Her labor lasted probably over 10 hours from what we can glean in terms of when she went into the hospital and then the time of birth. But in those shots of her coming out of the hospital, she certainly looked well, and the couple looked very happy with the baby cradled in their arms.
And what about the baby? What about names now, Henry? I mean, obviously, we've been playing this waiting game, waiting with all this excitement for the baby to arrive. Now it's the waiting game for the name. What do we know?
Right. The waiting game in the beginning was for the birth, and then the waiting game was to know the sex of the baby, and finally, as you say now, is to know the name. The bookies are already doing a brisk business with people betting on the names. I think right now the front runners for a baby boy are James and George, probably George more than the others. There are a couple of other names that seem to be surging ahead also, which are Alexander and actually Henry. The couple will not pick anything outlandish. They'll go with something that's a tried and true royal name. But one thing to remember is that even though they may pick the name George, let's say, that doesn't guarantee that that will be what they call the regnal name, the name that the baby will actually use as an adult king. When you had George VI, who is the father of the current queen, he, as you may have known from the movie The King's Speech, was known as Bertie. His first name was Albert, and George was only one of his following names, and he chose George as his regnal name. So they may name this baby George, they may name him James, but don't be sure that that's going to be what his name will be once he's on the throne.
Well, I'm waiting with anticipation. And Henry, tell us now then, just to wrap up, where do things go from here?
Well, where they literally went from here, the Duke and the Duchess, was into a car that Prince William drove himself back, presumably, to their new digs at Kensington Palace, which is the royal lodgings that his mother, the late Princess Diana, lived in when she was alive. It's been renovated for their use. It's got dozens of rooms, as you would imagine, and now it's the start of the royal baby's life. And it will be a challenge for them to keep him out of the public eye as much as possible as an infant, and then during his boyhood, just as it was for William and Harry to be kept out of the public eye when they were boys.
Thank you so much, Henry, for your insight. This is so exciting, and I wish I were there in London with you. For more on this story and others, please go to latimes.com.